Did you know 2 of our hosts have siblings with special needs? Today they're sharing how life was growing up with a sibling who needed extra care and the challenging emotions kids can go through. So grab your drinks, pop in those earphones, especially if you have little ones around, and let's dive right into episode 64.
That's good, guys.
Cheers. Okay, ladies. So tell us about your sibling diagnosis.
Okay, so in previous episodes, I've mentioned that I had a sister that passed away when she was 5, about to be 6. But she was born with cerebral palsy. And what cerebral palsy is a group of disorders that affect a person's ability to move and maintain balance and posture. That's the CDC's definition
Google.
of it.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. So, when I probably didn't understand that she had special needs until probably like the following year that after she was born. So I was probably 6 when I grasped the concept of her having like special needs or that she was different or anything like that. Only because I think that's when my mom started taking us along to like her doctor's appointments and stuff, and then she would sit us like while we're in the waiting room or whatever, she would sit us down and she would kind of explain to my brother and I like, this is what's going on. And I think that's where she would even tell us like, you guys are gonna have to help, just because that's previous year my dad had passed, so she basically was doing it all on her own. So she needed my brother and I to like step in a little bit. So I think that's when we started figuring out, or she had spoke to us that like, you know, your sister has this and this is what's going on, this is why we're here.
How old was your sister when your dad passed away?
She was a newborn.
Oh my
March. She was born in March. He passed in June.
Dude,
Wow.
to lose a husband while you have a newborn?
Yeah,
That's
so
awful.
I think that whole year, like when she was born and he had passed, like I think we just kind of were all like in a blur. And then I think that's when she started taking her to her appointments after, because that's when I think she knew there was something wrong. According to my mom, I mean, I was young at the time. According to my mom, she knew she was going to have special needs prior to giving birth. And
Oh, really?
yeah, and I think like as I got older, I would try to research it, and it was like most people think that it's something that occurs while giving birth, like something went wrong.
Yeah.
But there's been studies where like something could have happened to her while she was in my mom's womb. Like if my mom had an infection, it could have like damaged her brain somehow.
Wow.
So there's studies that show like it could have, like they could have detected it before birth, but most common is like something happened while she was giving birth.
Oh.
So according to my mom, she had told us like she already knew, and like the doctor had given her the option to abort, and like I don't know, like I was so young at the time, like she, you know, she said would tell us this and that, but like it's weird because now that I'm a mom and I'm old enough to like research it myself, I'm like, something happened to you when you were giving birth, like that didn't happen. But and this was before my mom had passed. Like I had asked her all these questions because I was concerned for my kids. Like, you know, the doctors ask you
It's
like
genetic.
is there something in your family that could be passed along? And so when I would ask my mom the question, she's like, oh, it's not genetic, like I already knew, and I'm like, so that's something that's genetic then. But you know, like when you research it, supposedly it's something that happens during birth. But she says she doesn't know if she had an infection while she was pregnant, but apparently she knew prior to giving birth. So that's she tried to explain everything.
And she's the youngest. Your sister is the youngest,
Yeah,
right? So she would know if it felt different,
Yeah.
like her pregnancies.
So how was your relationship with your sister?
At the time, I mean, I was like 5, 6. Like she was my best friend at the time. Like I always told her my little secrets, even though like she couldn't, because I knew she couldn't tell anyone else. And like I had to help take care of her. So to me, I considered her my best friend when we were little. And she had ended up passing when I was probably 11.
And she was how old?
She passed at 5, but the following month she would have been 6. So maybe 6, I guess. Yeah, so I mean, I was with her a lot, so I always just thought she was one of my best friends.
What did you see, like, her symptoms and stuff
At
that age?
How I would describe it was she basically was a baby just in a stretched out body.
Okay.
Like, she couldn't talk. She would just, like, babble, like, you know, like a baby, and she couldn't walk, and she was in a wheelchair. So, like, that's how I would just explain it to everyone. Was like, she was just a baby and her body was growing, except her, like, everything else wasn't, like, functioning.
Was she able to eat, or did she have
She was able to eat. I want to say we had to give her formula, like, longer than you would normally give, like, a baby, but towards the later years, she started eating, but it would still have to be cut up, like, for a baby. So, because I remember having to, like, bottle feed her a lot, and that was, like, one of my chores. Like, in order for me to leave and go play with my friends, I had to, like, feed my sister, and it was, like, through a bottle, and that's when I would, like, confide in her, like, all my little secrets.
You remember talking to her and stuff?
And I remember, like, telling her, don't tell anyone, and I'm, like, feeding her like a baby, like,
That's what a precious memory. I see her eyes are getting all glossy. What a precious memory.
I love it. How would other people treat her?
Through my eyes as a kid, they just treated her like a baby. Like, you know, when you bring a new kid into the world, like, everyone's like, oh, how precious. And, like, that's all how I would see it. Like, when we had family over, like, everyone would, like, want to hold her or whatever. And as she got older, like, you can tell she had personality, but she was always, like, so happy, like, constantly smiling. Like, you know, like, I forgot what your friend's name was. Darlene? And how she had mentioned, like, kids with special needs are usually a lot more happy and, you know, whatever. And I feel like that's how my sister was. Like, she was always smiling. Like, her eyes were super huge and would, like, brighten up the room. So everyone was, like, super nice to her all the time. Like, I never noticed, like, they treated her different or, like, you know.
Did she go to school?
Yes. We would have her go to, like, an elementary school. Like, the bus would come get her and...
Yeah, but she wasn't able to communicate verbally?
No, like, she couldn't speak words or anything.
What about in public? Like, when you guys would go out in public, would you notice that anybody, like, stare and stuff? Or were you too young to really...
I think I was too young. Like, I didn't really think about it like that. Like, I didn't think, like, she was different.
Was she in a wheelchair?
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
So... I mean, and it wasn't even just, like, a normal, like, you know, you push the wheelchair. It's, like, the type that you have to strap them in because, like, she would just fall, you know. So, I don't know. Like, as a kid, like, you don't really notice things like other people, like, looking differently. But I never noticed.
Oh, that's cool.
And what about you, Janelle? Because you have a sibling also.
Yeah, so my brother, he's the youngest of 5, and he has a rare genetic disorder that's called Prader-Willi syndrome. And I guess 1 out of, like, 10,000 people are diagnosed with this. And it's a physical and mental, they have, like, physical and mental behavioral problems. And he has something where he's never full. So that they're based, like, that's a really
like
big thing.
Right?
Yeah, so a lot of are obese. A lot of people with this syndrome are obese because they will do anything to find food. Like, we would have to lock our refrigerators and our pantries because in the middle of the night he would sneak, and he was so quiet too, and we would find we would find ice cream cartons under his bed.
Oh my God.
And he would go through all of it. He would go through snacks and stuff. So finally my parents would they learned that they needed to lock up things and stuff. So that was a big worry like growing up was that he would, because a lot of people with this syndrome, if they don't control their diet, like their family doesn't control their diet, then they can die of a heart attack because of their obesity.
Wow.
Yeah, and very early. So that, and he was, you know, he looked completely different from us. He was blonde hair, blue eyed, and we were all darker, you know, and we all looked Mexican, darker, you know, darker skin, darker hair. And then he was chubby because he ate everybody. He just ate
everybody.
I was gonna say he ate everybody's food. Would just constantly eat, basically. But so anyway, when I remember him being born, I was like 6, right? At like the same age as you. And we were so excited to have another baby, right? We had my sister, and then my mom had him like a year after. And I knew that he was different only because we had a situation at the house. I don't really remember because I was so young, but I remember my mom having to go to the grocery store. And so my dad was watching us, and he could have, now that I'm thinking back, like maybe my brother was taking a nap, and so my mom went to the store and left my dad napping in charge, you know, whatever. And my brother woke up, started crying, and at this point, I think he was like 6 months-ish. And all of a sudden, like I heard him crying, and then all of a sudden I heard him stop crying, and then I went into the room, and he was blue. His face was blue. He was choking on his tongue, like he had swallowed it. He was
Really?
So I ran to my dad's room, and I just remember waking him up, and then he came, and then they called the ambulance, and they came, and it was like a big old ordeal. And I remember, I just, you know, as a kid, you don't really know what's going on, but I remember them saying, like, the firefighters telling me, like, if you didn't tell your dad, then he would have died. Like, you saved your brother's life. And I felt like a hero, like, he's my baby. So that was like a big deal. But then it wasn't until then that I noticed, like, other things were going on. But it had nothing to do with, I don't know if that had to do with his, I think he was having like a little seizure, which has to do with his disability. So I'm not really sure what happened, but that's when I became like extra aware of him. And then after that, I noticed like he was definitely different from, you know, everybody else. And he kind of liked to do his own thing. He didn't really like to, he liked to socialize, but then he liked to be by himself. And I was very protective of him, like, because I was 6 years older than him. I remember just always like wanting to just make sure he was okay and make sure that people treated him good. And like, he would call me his second mom eventually, like in life, you know, later on. But the way that his syndrome would affect him, like, he was mentally delayed. So he's 30 years old now, and he's basically kind of like an 8-year-old mentally, you know, 8 to 10. I would say 8 to 10. And it's interesting because he is very, very smart. Like he's really sweet and kind, and he has a great memory. Like this kid could remember you if he met you one time. He remembers what you're wearing. He remembers where you work. He remembered the story about your dog. He remembered what your dog's name is. Like you just have to tell him one time, and he remembers everything, right? Exactly. But then he, like, I think for you know, school stuff, you know, like math and everything like that, he's at a lower level. And you know, so and he's so smart to where he manipulates. And that's, I guess, part of their syndrome is like manipulation for food. Most of the time it's manipulation for food.
That's
crazy. And with him, it's more manipulation to get
what he wants.
What he wants, but it's not necessarily food all the time. Sometimes it's like he'll have an outburst so that he can go to the hospital, because he loves going to the hospital because all the nurses are really kind to him. So when he learned that, like, at first it was food. At first he was like, if I go to the hospital and have an explosion, they're going to give me all this Jell-O and food that he wants, so right?
Funny.
And then he would flirt with the nurses. Like, he's so smart and how to, like, come on, navigate. So then he would get the nurses to bring him extra, or like a different nurse. He would swindle a different, like, he's so smart when it comes to like things like that. But he just like can't control his behaviors. Like, 1 minute you'll be having a great conversation with him, and then the next minute he'll just be triggered and he'll have like a huge tantrum where he's cursing everybody out, where he's throwing stuff, or he'll try to hurt himself, like to the point where it's uncontrollable. And now, like, I remember him kind of having little episodes like that when we were younger, but it wasn't as bad as it is now as an adult, because he's so much stronger and he's learned systems. So he knows, and he loves public attention when he's upset. So because he has you by the balls, you know what I mean? Like, he knows, like, if we're at home and he asks for something and my mom says no, no means no, and it's not happening. Well, we're out in public, he knows, like, if mom says no, that's negotiable, you know, because if he acts, you know, runs amok or whatever, sometimes my mom will just give in just to get him to calm down, because she knows how bad it could escalate to, you know. So for example, my brother, like, we would he loves, like, calling the cops. He would love to call the cops, because the cops would come and he would want them to take him to jail. He thought it was all fun and games. He just would love the attention. And then, you know, the cops would come and explain he can't take him to jail. But then one time a cop said, like, to my mom, you know, we can't take him to jail. We could take him to the hospital if he's a threat to himself, but we can't, like, other than that, like, put him on a 5150. And he heard that and he was like, I'm gonna hurt myself. Like, he wanted to go away from home.
My goodness.
So then he was like, well, then I'm gonna hurt myself. And then he, like, would try to hurt himself, so that they had to call the EMTs to come and transfer him to a hospital. So that was, like, a lot of my childhood was, you know, going through those kind of, you know, episodes like that. And then as far as, like, how other people would treat him, I think for the most part everybody loved him. You know, like, he's a funny kid. He loves to talk. But then he went to school and he would hear people call him retarded, or, you know, say mean things to him, or make fun of him because they would call him fat or whatever. And he knew, like, even though he wasn't up to his grade level, you know, he knew what hurtful things, you know, and he would tell me, like, that his feelings were hurt because people would say things like this to him. Or he would, you know, it was funny because we would ask him, like, do you have crushes in your class? You know, and it was always, like, the teacher or the teacher's aide, or somebody who didn't have a special need. Like, I think because we always treated him, we didn't treat him like he was different. And so we always, like, you know, treated him just like we treated the rest of our siblings. And so he would be like, yeah, she's hot. And, like, he always, like, had this, you know, high standards. And we'd be like, well, what about her? No, she doesn't talk much. I like her over there, you know, like, so that was hard to grow up to see the, like, strangers teasing him. So I think that made me even more, all of us, not just me, but my siblings, even more protective over him because of people and their bullshit, you know, like.
And that's where I was going to go into, people can be very cruel. Did you guys ever feel that you had to be protective over your siblings because of this reason?
I would say my protective instinct for her was just, like, a natural one, like an older sibling would have for a younger. Like, I never really viewed her differently, or because I never really noticed other people treating her differently, it was more, I was protective over her as, like, an older sibling would be for their younger sibling.
Yeah. What about you?
I felt really protective over him because I did see people mistreat him. And, like, dude, we would go to the park. I feel like everybody would stare, and that didn't bother me that much because I'm like, okay, people just stare, you know, whatever. But it was when people would say things like kids are awful. You know, you go to the park and my parents are watching, you know, a Netflix
filter.
Yeah, and then we're over here at the jungle gym, and then the little girls, like, talking crap or whatever. So we would get in a lot of confrontations because of that. Like as kids, like don't, for the most part, we would try to educate people. Like if they didn't come across super harsh and it was just they were staring, and then we would like explain, like, or if they would ask a question like what's wrong with him, like we would get kids, what's wrong with him? Oh, he has special needs, and like he wasn't born like you and me, and so he can't talk that well or whatever. We would try to explain it and educate them, but it was the times when the kids were like, like, ew, look at him, or whatever, then we would get really pissed off. And I remember we would get in like little rumbles at the park. It would get bad.
Did you guys ever feel embarrassed of them?
No, I'm not, just because I was so young, like things like that never really bothered me.
What does embarrass me the most is when he offends somebody else, because there's times where he knows what's gonna piss somebody off. So like, for example, when my husband, but he was my boyfriend at the time because we were in high school, his grandmother had died, and so we had just had her services and experienced the whole thing. And for some reason, I think we said, no, you can't watch this movie with us, or no, because it was a scary movie, or no, you can't have ice cream, you already had ice cream, or no, you can't anything to say no. And he went off on my boyfriend at the time, and he was like, fuck you and your dead grandma.
Oh
like,
my God,
yeah,
Michael.
Yes.
Oh my God.
So, and I just remember being like, oh, like, how can I come back? Like, how can I come back from those kind of things, So, like, he'll say things like that to people. And so that's when it's embarrassing. Like, there was one time where we had a behavioralist come. He was coming to work with Michael, and Michael was fine. And then, like, he was playing the guitar, trying to calm Michael down, like, oh, and then Michael's like, all right, we're done. Like, he was 13 at the time, and he was just like, I'm done. Like, I'm done. Like, he wasn't mad. He was just like, I'm done. And then the guy's like, well, Michael, we still have like 30 minutes on the clock. And he's like, no, I'm done. And then he walks over to the door and he opens the door. He's like, get out. And the guy was like, Michael, I'm sure, we could work this out. Like, sit down, and he's like, get the fuck out. He was like, grab your guitar and get the fuck out of my house. And then the guy was like, yeah. And he's just this little guy, and you don't picture him saying these things, but he was so mad. And I was so embarrassed. I was like, oh my God, how can, and I'm like, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. And the man's like, okay. And he's backing himself, and he was like,
the man got his ass. They'll put him out.
Yes. And so he left, but it's those kind of things that, when they say what they mean and there's no filter, and you're just like, I'm embarrassed, not for me, but I'm embarrassed for you. Yeah. Like, I'm embarrassed for the person that's getting it,
Did you guys ever feel jealous over the extra attention that they would get? Because I'm sure your parents had to take a lot more time with them. So did that bother you guys in any way?
No, but I do remember sometimes feeling like I couldn't enjoy just being a kid because of like the extra responsibility I had to do to help with her. Mm-hmm. Like, yeah. I will never forget, like, I had the moment where I'm like feeding her, and I remember like I really wanted to play so bad, and I had friends waiting for me outside, and my brother
could hear them in the background.
Yeah, my brother went out to go play with his friends and my cousins, and all of them were there. And my thing was, like, I cannot go out and play until, like, I fed her. And I remember, like, at that time, like, we were, like, near a cul-de-sac, so all the kids get to play in the cul-de-sac. And I remember, like, hearing, like, all of them playing, and I'm like, please just hurry up and eat. I want to go out. Like, yes. Why do I have to do this? But it was never, like, a jealous feeling because she was getting the extra attention. I just remember, like, having that specific feeling that I had to help take care of her.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Dude, I could so relate to that. You're so right. When I was younger, I remember feeling And it was funny. The thing that I was jealous of was that he got all this, he got to go to, like, preschool. And I didn't get to go to preschool, okay? So we went straight to kindergarten. And I remember he was younger than me, and he would have teachers coming when he was 2, like, coming to work with him, do speech therapy and all these puzzles. And so I remember thinking, like, how come I didn't get to go to preschool, you know? Like, I want to sit with this lady and do puzzles, and, like, that kind of extra care and extra attention that he would get, I just remember, like, wanting it, you know? And it didn't make me not like him or anything like that. It was just, like, I was one of 5 kids, you know? So I think that that's a common thing to want more attention when you are part of a huge pack like that. So the fact that he would get all that extra attention, I remember not really understanding, like, why he would get so many chances too, you know, because with us, like I told you in other episodes, like, we would get whoopings very quickly. It was like no nonsense, you know. And with him, like, they were a lot more lenient because he had special needs, you know, so they couldn't just whoop him with the belt if every time he said a bad word or he said something, because it was like he wouldn't be abused if they got him every time, you know.
He would be black and blue.
He would be black and blue, yeah.
Was his is it a genetic thing?
Yes.
Like,
so
you
he
have family.
No. It's a chromosome disorder, but it's not something that is, like, carried over. Yeah. Even though they still had me go through extra genetic screenings when I was pregnant because of the possibility, but no one before him had that.
So, like,
in other
your
families.
parents never were exposed to that prior.
No. Yeah.
Interesting.
Oh, wow.
Mm-hmm.
Did you guys ever feel pressure to be perfect or act out for attention since your parents had their hands full with your siblings? Like, you felt like, let me get in some trouble so I can get some attention.
Not that I can recall. I mean, I've always said that I'm, like, more of the black sheep in our family, but
you were bad.
I think I was just naturally bad. But that, I mean, it could have been a lot of different things. Like, my mom was always working, so maybe I wanted attention that way. Or, you know what I mean? Like, I don't think it was
that reason.
That specific reason, yeah.
I think that I put that pressure on myself because I saw, because I saw all the other kids, and I saw, like, my parents had so much going on with my brother. Like, he was constantly, like, doctor's appointments and medical procedures, removing tonsils, fixing this, fixing that. Like, you know, so I never wanted to be an extra burden on them. So I always tried to just not be perfect. Not be perfect, just fly under the radar. Like, I just did not just coast. Yeah, like, I tried to get good grades so I didn't get yelled at, because, like, here's the thing, where you're in a big family, there's kids getting yelled at for bad grades, there's kids getting yelled at for not doing their chores, there's kids getting yelled at for, you know, all not, like, doing all these things wrong. And I just remember thinking in my head, okay, check, I gotta do my chores. Check, I gotta do my homework. Check, I gotta study. Like, I just was like, what? Okay, I gotta do this. Exactly. So that was, like, my mentality. Like, I don't want to be yelled at. And I was so afraid of my dad because he was just this loud roar, you know, like, he was like a monster to me. So I just didn't want to get spanked, and I didn't want to get yelled at. So I was just going to do all the shit to make sure I didn't act up in class. I didn't try to be the class clown. Like, all of the things that you could think of, like, I would hear it at the dinner table every single night, a kid getting lectured, and that I was like, I don't want to be part of that. I don't want to get lectured.
It's funny because normally, like, the middle kid is the one that gets, like, the most, and you're considered probably one of the middle ones. So you're not the norm.
No, I didn't want to get lectured. I didn't want to get in trouble. And then they had their hands full with Michael too. So
you were like, I'm going to give you guys some ease with this child right here.
But what's funny
I'm
is,
the
like,
only normal one.
What's funny is you think that you would be favored, right? Like, but no, it was more like they didn't have to worry about me. So that was that.
Parents are not allowed to have favorites.
No, but my siblings still think that I was the favorite one because I didn't get yelled at the dinner table the way that they did. Or that, you know,
like I just smartened up and was like, I'm not about to do what you guys are doing.
Like, just do the shit. Just do it. I remember me and my brother would, like, race to do our chores, and he would finish first. He was always finishing first, but it was because he wouldn't do it right. And I'm like, dude, you missed this, you missed that. And
So
he's like, no, but I'm done, I'm first. And I'm like, oh, you're gonna have to redo that shit when dad comes home. And sure enough, my dad would make him redo the whole thing. Like, it was just constant things like that. The things that I did get in trouble for were always because of my brother Michael, because I didn't watch him the way that I was supposed to watch him. And we'll go into that later on, but those are the things that I would like get in trouble for.
Did you ever feel like your parents minimized your problem?
Yes and no, but our family dynamics weren't like the most ideal. Like my mom was doing a full-time, working full-time, and still had to like take care of my brother, myself, and my sister and her special needs. So I think like naturally, even if like my sister didn't have special needs, like I think it would have been the same. So yes and no. Like I think just because she was busy with so many other things and taking care of my sister, that maybe to me at the time, like she was minimizing like my problems, but I think too like she was just doing the best she can, and it really wasn't like a big deal, but to me it's like a life or death at the time.
Yeah. And then too, probably now as a mom, you probably can relate, because I feel like growing up, we see our parents doing all this stuff, and we think nothing of it. Like, okay, that's what they're supposed to do. But until you're a parent, you said she's working full time. She has a child with special needs. She has you. She has your brother. That's a lot to deal with. Like a lot.
Yeah.
I feel like all of our problems were minimized because Michael's problems were so much big. They were always so huge. Like he constantly had behaviors. He had a lot of trips to the hospital. Like this kid was always trying to hurt himself, swallowing a battery, if he was bored, he would think of things like, how can I go to the hospital? Because the hospital was his like fun time to shine, and so he was always calling the police. There were times where he would call the police and tell them that my dad had murdered my mom and cut her up into small pieces, so we would get like all these cops coming in, full force. Yes. And so like there were things like that, so that's why like I kind of, they were always really patient with Michael, and they would be like, okay, and they come, like the cops and stuff. So to me, I feel very thankful that of the good cops that were patient and understanding and would like walk us through everything.
Because he called so often, were they like, it's the same number?
Michael.
Yes. Was it ever like that? Like they knew
Michael, but then it would happen at other people's houses in different cities. Like we would be at a family party, and he would call and say the same story, and then cops would come break up this party. Like he was definitely one that we would go camping, and he would have a meltdown, and then the cops would come. Like that was. Yeah, and it's even to this day, it's not just him as a kid. It's like as an adult, we just had this happen like 3 years ago when we went camping, and it was so, awful because now we have kids and they're getting exposed to this, and they're seeing a cop come and take their uncle away, or like now that he's getting older, he's getting more aggressive. So like they had to pin him down, one time because Michael wanted to spit on them, and and then in their eyes they're like, oh my God, this cop's being awful. But it's like, what is he supposed to do? Just stand there and get hit? Like this guy, this kid's spitting on him, and he's not a kid to me. He's a kid, but he's a grown ass man now, So it's just hard, to explain to your kids like he wanted to go to jail. He wants to leave, and so and there's nothing when Michael is seeing red. There's nothing you can do to stop him. You could throw all his favorite people in the room.
Your mom too.
And try to beg him, and he's like, F all of you guys, I'm going. Like he just sees red. Like my mom too. My kids, anybody. Like there's nothing. So anyway, going back to my, like the question is like he needed constant supervision. I feel like he became... his problems were so much bigger. At some point, I think he was like in his early teens, he became a risk to himself because of all the things he was liking to swallow, and it escalated. It just kept getting bigger and more dangerous. Yeah, so eventually he had to move into a group home so that he can have that constant supervision, because my parents were still working. Yeah. So my parents didn't have all this extra help. Like, I don't know if it was available at the time, or maybe they just didn't know about it, but they didn't have like respite care and all the resources. So, and both of them worked full time. So it was us that would come home from school and watch them and not be able to play outside with your friends because you had to get him off the bus or whatever, you know? So, but it's interesting because of all the stuff that he goes through and he still struggles with, it kind of helps keep me grounded. Like, I'm a mess, but when he has an episode, it reminds me, like, okay, Janelle, shut the fuck up. Your problems are shit. Mm-hmm. When it comes to, like, your brother's not even at home, you know, like, all he would love to do is, oh, I don't want to get emotional, but, like, all he says, like, he just wants to be good so he can go and move back with my mom, you know? But I know that it'll never get to that point because he can't control himself.
But you don't think it will? You never know. He may get to a point where
he's been on so many different medications, which is another, like, roller coaster, because some, like, will basically sedate the kid where he's just completely not.
Like, that cannot.
And so he's been in different facilities trying to regulate his medications and stuff, and we've seen so many different stages that we're like, no, we're not gonna have you. Yeah. Sedated to the point that you're going on. Yeah. So right now his medications are as stable as they can be, and his episodes are probably every 3 to 6 months, which is actually better. It was getting really good before COVID, but COVID came and fucked it up because, you know, he can't work, he can't visit, he has nothing to look forward to. Yeah. So, but yeah, that's tough.
Did you guys feel isolated because your friends didn't understand your life since they didn't have siblings with special needs, or just isolated in general, even without the friends, just because you're dealing with that?
No, I mean, I was young, but like I mentioned in other episodes, like I grew up with my cousins, so, and everyone understood within our family and our huge family, and because there's so many of us, like, she wasn't the only one with special needs. Like, we had other cousins that had their own set of, like, disabilities, or, you know.
Oh, really?
So it wasn't uncommon for, like, our family to see something like, you know, a person in a wheelchair or whatever. Mm-hmm. So, but I mean, the friends that I did have from school, like, we were so young, it's not like something you, like, think about when you're that little.
I have another cousin who has Down syndrome, and they're night and day. I used to wish that my brother had Down syndrome, because she was so much more chill, and she didn't have behaviors, and she was able to go to school and be fine and socialize and just, you know, be in plays, and she did all kinds of cool stuff. And with my brother, his behaviors always overpowered, you know, everything for the kid, you know. So I just felt so bad that he had to go through all that. But as far as friends and stuff, I wasn't, like Marianne had said, like, I wasn't able to go play outside, or, you know, I had to come straight home after school because my parents did work, and I had to be the one to get him off the bus, which was always an episode because he would sometimes lay in the street because he didn't want to go inside, you know. So, like,
you never knew what you were
going to get. So I didn't really want to expose my friends to those kind of scenarios. So I didn't invite them to come over after school, you know. It was but when my friends would meet him, because they would meet him, you know, they loved him because he was a sweetheart. So he would, you know, charm them, and, like, my friend that came flirt on the episode, you know, like, he was a flirt. He was a ladies' man, and he loved it. He hardly had episodes when my friends were there, but they weren't there often. Now for boyfriends, that was another thing. Like, I remember if he knew I had a crush on a guy and I would bring him home, he would try to embarrass me. He would tell them the most embarrassing stories. Oh, Janelle just farted, or she did this, or he'd be like, what happened to her other boyfriend? Like, he would
and
literally...
See, that was so smart to know how to manipulate that situation. Like,
he would call my boyfriends the other person's name, you know? Like, for the longest time, he would call Jack the wrong name.
Oh, my God.
And I don't know, like,
Purposely.
obviously that's embarrassing, you know? And then, it was funny because my boyfriend, who turned into my husband, when we first started dating, you know, he has an uncle who has special needs. So he was like, oh, yeah, like, all about my brother Michael. And I don't know why, but we decided to leave him with, like, oh, we're going to run to go get some ice cream. And are you good with him? You know, and my husband was like, yeah, like, go ahead. I'm good with him.
Why would you leave him?
I know. And so when we left, I'm going to totally chop it up just because I'm like, that's going to be a long story. But when we left, he basically threatened my boyfriend and told him, like, you better put this scary movie on for me or else there's going to be problems. And so my boyfriend's like, but your mom said no, like, I can't, you know, and we're just teenagers, like 17. Anyway, they start wrestling for
the remote.
Whatever. And so Michael is pinned down on the floor, and then Michael kicks my boyfriend in the face.
Oh,
and
my God. Oh, my God.
So it was bad. And then my boyfriend was like, please don't leave me. Please don't leave me
Ever.
Yeah, so anyway, there was a lot of situations like that. And then, you know, thank God that he stuck around. But, yeah.
He made it through.
He made it through.
So do you guys ever feel like you had to grow up too fast because of the responsibilities you had for your sibling?
Not really. I think the responsibilities I was given to help with her was common for, like, an older sibling for her. I mean, like, you know, she was basically still a baby, so it's like as if I had a baby sister, you know, like I had to feed her. But that I know it was not the normal chore like my friends had at the same time. So I don't know, like, I wouldn't say that I missed out on my childhood or anything, because then still, like, she passed away when I was really young, so it's not like she held me back from anything. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I feel like I matured quicker because of the things that we were exposed to so early on, you know? And I think that because of him, it helped me to learn to be compassionate towards people who look different from you know, whether it's in color or size or disability or syndromes. Like, we would go to a lot of his, like, school functions, so you would see children who had all kinds of different syndromes, you know, not just his syndrome. And there were kids in wheelchairs and kids that had different, you know, tubes in them and things like that. And as, you know, you're a kid, you're curious, but you treat them kindly and understand, that they were born this way, and that doesn't make them any less than you know. So we had those kind of conversations really early on. And just to be kind to them. And then, but I will say that because I was resentful because I was like, we were babysitters, you know, like my mom had to go to work, and maybe I would have been resentful anyway because, you know, my parent, even if he was normal, you know, we would still have to babysit. But, you know, obviously with all of his different behaviors, and like, we couldn't just take him anywhere, you know, like that. We always had to watch him, and we would go to family functions, and I remember our parents kind of like hanging out with the parents, and then we were in charge of him, and it was like, but he doesn't want to play with everybody, and he doesn't want to listen. Like, so then we would have to sit and do what he wanted to do, which was nothing, you know. So that's when I would feel resentful, like, I want to play with the kids hide and seek, and he never wants to play. He just wants to play here. And he would like kind of stimulate himself by like tying his shoelaces into knots. And I'm like, what kid really wants to sit there? And, you know, so that was hard as a kid, like feeling like, just watch your own kid. I don't want to watch your kid, you know, like, I want to play.
And I think that could have went anyway with like siblings that didn't have special needs, because I feel like you always kind of look towards the older one to help with the younger one.
Yeah.
You know, like to watch your sister when you guys go outside, or you know, you always give them that responsibility as parents. What ideas do you guys have for parents who want to make sure all their kids' needs are being met?
I would say this would apply to even if you didn't have a special needs kid, like to spend as much one-on-one time with each individual kid. Like, you know, I have 2 sons. I would apply that same advice to them or idea. Like, each kid requires attention, and if you neglect one more than the other, like, something's gonna happen, you know what I mean? Like, they'll start lashing out or start...
Or a little set up a rivalry.
So, I think just, you know, like the mommy and me dates, like, you know, spend as much one-on-one time with them as you can.
Yes.
I like that.
That's a good one. I think also explain at a young age, like the situation of your family. You know, like your family doesn't look the same as other people, and you guys have to be like a united front and more of like a team. Like, we're all in this together, you know, and we have to kind of protect him and cheer him on as well, you know, so that he can get acclimated to everyone else. I also feel like it's hard. I don't want to, like, I say don't leave a kid in charge of a kid with special needs. And I feel like obviously everyone's special needs is different.
Yeah, controversial.
But when it's severe behaviors like that, like there were times where my mom would go to work and my brother would run away from home before we even woke up. You know, so my mom would leave to work, she would sneak off to work in the morning, and I remember her saying like, "Hey, I'm leaving, you know, like everyone's sleeping, you know, but keep an ear out for your brother." And then I'd fall back asleep, and then we'd wake up and my brother would be gone. Like, he loved playing this game where he would hide and seek and he would leave. And it got scarier as he got older because he would go to other people's houses. Like, he would go to the neighbor's house and into their house or into their garage or whatever, you know. So we would have to call the cops to figure out where he was. And so anyway, I think that that's a lot of responsibility to put on a kid. And even like, it's hard as an adult because he's done it even with my parents there. So if your child is doing these extreme things when it's just you and your husband, like,
it's hard for
you can't expect kids to be able to hold it down.
But I think too, like, it's normal for parents to naturally like bark orders at the older sibling to like tend to the younger sibling, and I think like that's one thing all parents should be aware of. Like, don't bark orders at like your older child to take care of your younger child and expect them to do it because
as good as you
especially correctly and like
like kids need to be kids, so you can't like just expect them that they're gonna do it just because you said, you know.
And I think because of that, because I grew up in a family where my older brother, he was the head of all the rest of us, and then, or not my oldest brother. My oldest brother, he didn't live with us for a long time, but so my second to the oldest, which in the household, he was our oldest one. But anyway, he was in charge of us. And then when he moved out, it was me in charge, and then so on and so on, you know. So because I saw all of that responsibility and stress that you put on these kids, I don't want to do that to my kids, you know. So like, if my kids are outside and the younger one wants to go outside, I'll have to go outside to make sure, because I want the kids to play too. I don't want them, because I remember being that kid that couldn't play and had to watch everybody else play because I'm tied down, you know. So I just remember that, and I try to be like aware of that, or like more sensitive to that, you know.
But sometimes in situations, some parents don't have it to where they can be around to like watch the kids outside, so they look for that older sibling to take the responsibility to keep an eye out on them.
Quick,
so it's hard.
Real quick before we wrap it up, because this is like a mom question for myself. Because your kids have been exposed to like your brother's behaviors and seeing all that, like, is there a specific way that you explain his special needs to them? Like, because now Landon's at an age where like he gets picked up and dropped off right next to the special needs kids, and like, how do you, as you know, with your family, like explain it to your kids, like they're different this way, but without making it seem like they're different. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So the way, I mean, I could be politically incorrect, but like I've always told them like, well, because I've always had Uncle Mike to reference, right?
Yeah.
They're Uncle Mike. But if they get curious, like, why is he different and things like that? Like, sometimes people are born differently, or sometimes people can get in an accident where they end up acting differently, you know? So, like, because I want them to know, like, it really can happen to anybody. I remember when I was working, there was a little boy who got in a snowboarding accident, and then he now was mentally delayed. It took him back. He was like 13 or 14, and it took him to like a 6-year-old mentality. So I just will explain those kind of things to them because but I don't know. I guess it just depends on the age, you know, because my sons are a little bit older. So I feel like I want them to know, like, be very thankful that you're functioning and your body is functioning and your brain's functioning at full capacity, you know, because at any time anybody could get in an accident. My friend Darlene was saying on a different episode that she has all like extra help, you know, so that she's able to spend that extra time because you were saying, you know, spend extra time with your kids, each one of them designate, you know, quality time with them. And we did not get that. We did not get that as kids because there were so many of us, and my mom didn't have any extra help. You know, I mean, God, she was lucky if my dad helped. So there was no that one-on-one quality time, and I think that is so important. Yeah. Like you said, regardless if you have a special needs child, it's important. But there's so many resources out there now that allow you to get extra in-home care so that they could watch your child that has special needs for a couple hours so that you can have that one-on-one time, because that one-on-one time, it really makes a big difference. Crucial, yeah. And not every kid is going to tell you that they're feeling neglected or lonely or resentful. You know, they're just a kid. So I would say overly communicate, because the more questions that you ask, the more that they'll kind of open up, you know. Like I know with my children, I'll ask them, how was your day at school? Good. And then that's it. So then I'll ask them, well, who did you play with on the playground, you know? And like, you know, just, was anybody mean to you? Was anybody kind to you? Like things like that I just in detail just to get some type of conversation flowing, because I feel like those kind of questions will get them to open up a little bit more. Like they want to tell you. I'll ask them what happens in class or what did you learn today, and like they won't tell me anything. But if I'm like, who'd you play with on the playground, you know, then they're like, oh, Sally, and then Timmy said this, and exactly, and then it'll spiral into like an actual conversation, and I'm like, okay, so what did you learn in class? By the way. Yeah, so that's it. That's my spiel.
Well, I would like to thank you ladies for sharing your stories on here. Usually we're interviewing other people, but today we have our very own. So you guys did excellent, great advice, and
hope this helps, guys.
Hopefully it does. Thank you, guys.
Thanks so much for hanging out with us. If you want to catch up on our previous episodes, visit mamasmimosas.com, where you'll get access to all of our podcast show notes, our YouTube videos, and our private Facebook group, where we chat with you about each episode topic and host live question and answers with our favorite mom tribe. Can't wait to see you there.